I had worked I was a nurse before I went into medicine, and I'd worked in intensive care, burn unit, emerge, and had really got quite burnt out. And I heard about this course where they taught you to deliver babies at Dalhousie University. It was called the Outpost and Community Health Nursing Program. I went and took that and started working in a remote First Nation in northwestern Ontario and in the Yukon. And that work just, I think I thought medicine, the anxiety and worry I had that I didn't know enough would end if I became a doctor, except, it didn't. It's a constant of worrying you don't know enough. But that was what pushed me. I looked around and I had thought, well, I have extra training. I'm great for the community when I first went there. And a year and a half later, I realized how much more I needed to know to serve the community well. So that motivated me. I think a lot of the things I did in my career, I did full spectrum family medicine, intrapartum obstetrics, emerge, hospital care and community care. But there were other women doing it, like I wasn't the only one. I did go into politics because I saw so many things I wanted to fix, and I was brought up in the family where you can complain about things as long as you're part of a solution. So that was my goal. So as I said, I was president of the Ontario College of Family Physicians. I think to me the only real trailblazing thing I did was working with the remote First Nations who in 2010 had really a horrible problem with opiate use disorder, and none of us knew what to do. And with the help of mentor Mel Kahan in Toronto, I worked with the community and we started a community-based Suboxone program. And that was the first of its kind. And I also was working with the First Nations High School in Thunder Bay on an opiate use disorder program. I worked with the nurse practitioner, May Cat, and we started that. And those things, I think, really, we were the first that did those things. And but I was surprised. A rabble rouser, yeah, that I would have believed. But Trailblazer sounds much more complimentary. So. My grandmother was a tireless fighter for social justice, worked against child labor, worked for health for all in the U.S. That's American by birth, Canadian by choice. And both my parents were strong social advocates. And so I grew up in a family where that was the norm. And so I think that was part of it. And I don't think especially at the beginning, I was thinking I was being an ally for Indigenous people, but I feel like that was a big part of my learning, was to take my ego out of it, which in my early career, there was a lot of self-righteousness and look at me being wonderful and standing up for this, and then learning some humility, learning to ask Indigenous people with this, how could I help? What would be best? What role would you see me playing? And there was discussion at one of the workshops about witnessing racism in healthcare and what can you do? And again, like a bit of a steep learning curve where initially I just had bystander guilt, and I got to the point where I thought, no, you have more power, you have privilege, use it. And so I practiced and thought about what I would say the next time something happened and started doing that. And yeah, I'm rambling a bit, but that's, to me, it's all connected. It's all part of learning to hopefully be better at being an ally. I still get it wrong sometimes, but it's work I believe in and I'm striving to be better at. And I think that work and keeping one's ego out of things helps you stay in the work, and it sustains you. And the very steep learning curve of how do I work with people who've lived with depression all these years in a way that's respectful and truly helpful. And as I said, I'm still so far away from where I'd like to be, but I feel like I'm on that path, and I feel committed to it. And I'm lucky enough to work with colleagues in Sioux Lookout who feel the same. I used to always say our numerators are all different, but our denominators, social justice, and what that looks like to people is slightly different, but there's a real commonality there. So that helps. Well, I didn't always overcome them, but the biggest challenge I remember, different places I've worked, but feeling like, and knowing my voice didn't carry the same weight as my male colleagues. And, when there were meetings to go to, the female staff were never chosen. There was a real battle to prove that we could be as effective. And I think I got caught up in that, in showing that I could do just as much merge and obstetrics, but I was a single mom. So this ties in with some of the other questions, I think, and that's where if I had a do-over, I look at many of my colleagues now with little children, and they balance it out a lot more. They contribute, they work hard, but they are very protective of their family time. But I felt like it was so important that I proved that a woman could do the heavy lifting of rural family medicine as a generalist, that I was working 60, 80-hour weeks when my son was 6 to 10. And, I missed a lot, and you never get that back. So, but I think that challenge of feeling like you didn't count, like your voice wasn't as important, that somehow you were lesser than, was challenging. And then, in my training and a little bit afterwards, there were comments, that today would be labeled as sexual harassment, but at the time was just considered joking, and you weren't supposed to get upset, and if you responded in a strong way, you didn't have a sense of humor, and those kinds of things. I think in general, I think sometimes the world would be so much farther ahead if women didn't have to worry, are we safe? Can we speak openly? Do we count? Can I walk through that parking lot? And if you think of the energy that gets expended, when you're scrubbed into an OR and somebody makes a comment and you can't just walk away, but somehow you have to navigate that. And I feel like that had been part of being a woman in medicine when I was training and in the years afterwards. There have been lovely examples of colleagues who were truly collegial without the misogyny, without that, but it's never 100%. So there's always some energy going to that I feel gets wasted. The first thing I'd say is comprehensive family medicine is an amazing job. It is a privilege. I have loved it. Like I loved it. I still love it. And I think one of the things that happens naturally as you get older is the nights are harder. You maybe do less emerge. You might drop delivering babies because those sorts of things. But I would say to young women, don't do that too soon. Like, don't shrink your practice. Like, that's like, it's when you're young and you can be learning and have that steep curve and have diversity in your practice, I would definitely vote for that. And I think rural medicine gives you that opportunity much more than urban medicine. It's not impossible in urban healthcare to do it, but rural medicine, it's just you walk in the door and you never know. And especially if you're working with a good group of colleagues, there's nothing better. Steep learning curve, not at the expense of your patients, because you have a team around you and you're doing meaningful work. It really has and continues to me to be a passion and something I've loved. And I never forget how hard it was to get accepted. And I think sometimes people forget that. And yeah, the training's tiring, the job can be tiring. But think how lucky you were to get one of those 100 spots. And don't forget that you're lucky to be there, I think. So find a community you're connected to and enjoy. But like I said earlier, I think a big part for younger women, if you're having children, then you need to practice put the family first and then build your practice around that, because studies have shown that women in their early career might take more time off for kids and family, but they contribute more in the last half of their career, whereas men tend to pour it on in the first part, and then they pick like a piece of medicine and do that in the later part. And those are obviously generalities. But I think I would say do the career. I would advocate for rural remote medicine and right through, and keep doing CPD. If you get a chance to pick up new skills like ultrasound or doing procedures, go for it.